In 2016, a young man in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho fires 6 .45 ACP rounds into his pastor, who he is adamant is a reptilian alien in disguise, before jumping on a plane, flying cross-country only to be arrested at the White House. The pastor miraculously survives. Even a point-blank shot to the head, not enough to take him down. In 1982, a check bounces, so a shipping company sends a truck to repossess their cargo container. The container was so heavy, lifting it onto the truck snaps the winch. A worker is sent in to see what cargo is causing this container to be so heavy, only to find approximately 16,500 dead baby fetuses inside. In 2019, a couple in Wales begins to hear faint screams emanating from the walls and floor of the basement of their flat. Audio equipment reveals blood-curdling screams and desperate cries for help. The couple records hours of audio, capturing extremely disturbing evidence of something horrifying happening under their feet. They are ignored by law enforcement and made out for fools in the media, but a local conspiracy begins to close in on the couple, causing them to flee their home, never to return. Every once in a while, I find a case that seems like the tip of a colossal iceberg. Events, deaths, and mysteries so confounding it begins to feel as though the veil has been pierced, and the whole world is about to be exposed to some horrific truth. Then, they're just gone. A blip on the radar and then nothing. It's as if the details you remember never existed, and the write-ups that remain, if any remain at all, lean towards complete skepticism or disbelief in general. In my experience, those cases don't just disappear. They're suppressed, hidden, and buried. These are 3 such cases I refuse to allow to become memory hold. On Tuesday, March 8, 2016, tourists taking photos of the White House saw a young man tossing something over the black iron fence surrounding the historic building. Secret Service agents approached the man, who seemed to be attempting to deliver something directly to President Trump. They apprehended him and ran his name, Kyle Odom, through a law enforcement database. Kyle was a college-educated Marine veteran, and to their shock, he had a red flag warrant out for his arrest, issued just 2 days prior. The charge? The attempted murder of his pastor, Tim Remington, all the way back in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. What led Kyle Odom to the White House and caused him to do what he had done was documented thoroughly in Kyle's own manifesto, a 42-page document revealing the bizarre, twisting rabbit hole that led him to the darkest depths imaginable. To put it plainly, Kyle had waited for Pastor Tim Remington to leave church. Once Tim was at his car with his back turned, Kyle, standing about 15 feet away, raised a .45 caliber handgun and fired 6 shots, one of them striking Remington in the head, lodging near his brain, one collapsing his lung, and the rest striking his shoulder area. Why? Because Kyle was convinced that Remington was a reptilian Martian, hell-bent on controlling his mind and ruining his life. When Kyle Odom was approximately 20 years old, he joined the Marine Corps, serving from 2006 to 2010 as a flight expedition technician. During his service, he received an Iraq Campaign Medal with 1 star, indicating he served during a campaign phase in Iraq. When Kyle left the military, he entered the University of Idaho, graduating summa cum laude in biochemistry in 2014. University records confirm that Odom was a Dean's List student who was awarded a fellowship in 2013 for advanced research in aging. As part of the fellowship, Odom presented biomedical research at a regional conference of the National Institutes of Health. In biographical documents associated with the fellowship, Odom wrote that he planned to seek a PhD in biochemistry. According to Kyle's manifesto, everything that led to the attack on Tim Remington began in the spring of 2014. Everything started while I was at University of Idaho. Spring 2014 was my final semester, and I was taking a heavy course load. Look at my transcript. I was very stressed due to the intensity of my schedule, so I searched for a way to cope. I discovered meditation, which seemed to help, so it became a part of my daily routine. As I learned more about meditation, I became interested in consciousness and our ability to affect it. I kept working on my meditation techniques and began achieving extreme states of consciousness. Today's video is all about disturbing unsolved mysteries. But you know what shouldn't be a mystery? Your health. That's why I need to tell you about the sponsor of this video, ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across nearly every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skin care, and much more. You can filter for doctors that take your insurance, are located nearby, are a good fit for any medical need you may have, and who are highly rated by verified patients. You can also see their actual appointment openings, choose a time that works for you, and click to instantly book a visit. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments. You don't have to talk to anyone, just book with a few clicks. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/Parasyke, link is also in the description, to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. And thanks so much to ZocDoc for sponsoring today's video. Kyle goes on to describe a bizarre encounter he experienced during meditation. One night in February of 2014, it was the most profound experience I've ever had. I was lying in bed meditating, then suddenly left my physical body. I entered a space that was completely dark and had no awareness of my physical boundaries or orientation. I felt very peaceful there until a blue light began to approach me. As the blue light got closer, I realized it was another being. Once I was in the being's presence, I felt an immediate sense of wrongdoing. It felt like I was being told, "You shouldn't be here." I instantly conceded and felt so guilty. I began to distance myself from the being. This had some kind of impact on them and seemed to change their mind about me. The moment I began to distance myself from the being, I became overwhelmed by a feeling I can only describe as unconditional love. During this part of the experience, our minds became connected. I saw that the being was female. I then began to feel the most euphoric, comforting, and blissful feelings I've ever felt. It was incredibly powerful and life-altering. Next thing I knew, I woke up. I had tears in my eyes and I couldn't get out of bed. I felt a profound sense of loss, like I had just lost someone so close to me. It was very painful. A few minutes later, the experience left my mind against my will, and I went about my day. After that, I had no urge to meditate at all. Every time I even thought about meditation, the thought was stripped from my mind. When I finally did try meditating again, I was unable to achieve anything. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I knew it wasn't going to improve. Ultimately, I decided to give up on meditation and just focus on my classes. Kyle explains how after meeting this exotic entity, everything became extremely easy for him. School had become entirely trivial for him, and he felt as though he had tapped into some kind of hidden power. About a month after the experience, he began interviewing at graduate schools. He accepted an offer from Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, to work on a PhD in human genetics. Kyle attempted to make things work at graduate school, but inside, he was completely beside himself. Not only with how easy everything had become, but with all the issues he was finding in his professor's research and all the projects that were available for him to work on. He felt as though he was the only person able to see all these glaring problems with all these research projects, so he left. And that's when his life blew up. Kyle believed that some shadowy entity wanted him in that graduate program, and that once he left, the entity began dismantling his life in order to force his obedience. He claims 2 students, Eugene and Brandon, who he did not know, tried to force him to return and brainwash him into becoming a school shooter. Once he left Baylor College in Texas behind, Kyle began seeking employment. He had flown out of state to interview with a food company. The interview went poorly due to lack of sleep, which he felt was again some sort of strange interference from the dark beyond. On the plane ride back home, my seat was taken. I asked a flight attendant and she directed me to a new seat. Once I sat down, an older gentleman in front of me kept glancing back until he got my attention. As he kept looking back, my head began to hurt and tingle. The moment my head began to hurt, his lips curled up into this evil-looking smile. The pain and tingling in my head continued for the rest of the flight and got even more intense as time went on. Every time I felt it, the man would start taking notes in a notepad. About halfway through the flight, someone else in front of me held up a newspaper that said, "Psychic Reading." for like 5 minutes straight. It was blatantly obvious they were doing something to me, but I didn't know what. Once we landed, the older gentleman kept showing me his track phone as if to say, "Get one of these." I had applied to several government agencies before this happened, so I thought this might be one of their ways of contacting me. Out of curiosity, I decided to go buy a track phone. I checked it every day to see if anyone messaged or called. About a month later, I got a text message from a man named John Padula. He invited me to come to church at the altar. It seemed like a strange place to be recruiting for government jobs, but I went anyway. After I got there and went inside, something felt very wrong. I felt as if my life was in danger, and I became so uncomfortable I had to leave. A couple days later, I started receiving text messages from Tim Remington. At first, they were innocuous Bible messages, but then he started threatening me. He sent messages talking about their power and other things. He did all of this through Bible verses so it would not look suspicious. I ignored everything until he sent one final text message, which simply said, "Angels." I thought nothing of it until helicopters started flying around my house all day and all night. At this point, I knew I was in trouble. I knew I needed to contact them. So I made an appointment to meet John Padula for coffee. Little did I know, he had no intention of meeting me. It's after coming into contact with Altar Church, and more specifically, after scheduling that meeting with John Padula for coffee that would never occur, that Kyle believes a terrifying, hypersexual spiritual attack began. In his manifesto, he describes in grueling detail getting unnatural erections and receiving extreme sexual stimulation against his will, both penile and anal. He would suffer and agonize through sleepless nights, hearing songs singing the lyrics, "Sister, sister, he's just a plaything," on repeat for hours while he endured the assault. He heard voices in his head saying things like, "You're going to be uncomfortable. All you have to do is breathe. And you're going to be sacrificed like Jesus. You will be beheaded." He experienced what he believed were synchronicities. Like after one of these dreams where he heard voices telling him about how he was going to get killed like Jesus, a missionary showed up handing him a pamphlet that had the title, "The Sacrifice of Jesus Christ." He decided to flee Idaho and run back to his parents in New Mexico. When I reached the Spokane airport, my panic subsided. Everything was fine until I got on the plane to Albuquerque. I sat next to this huge man who kept telling me, telepathically, that he was going to crash the plane. Every time he spoke, he would sniff emphatically. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there trying to stay as calm as possible. The man became angry about this and started touching my leg. The second he touched me, I could feel him inside my mind. This caused me to panic until I was on the verge of causing a scene. Before I did anything, he told me to calm down and said,
"You did a great job. You passed. Go enjoy your family. We have a job waiting for you when you get back."
I thanked him and felt slightly relieved, but I had no intention of contacting him at all. My only thought was to get as far away from him as possible. The sniff is something they do all the time. I think it has something to do with dominance. Eventually, they threatened to harm my family, which caused me to give in to them. I told them I would do whatever they want if they left my family alone. They responded by saying, "Go to church." I knew they meant the altar, so I agreed to go when I got back. When I went back to the altar for the first time, the people acted very strange. It was unhuman. As I walked into the sermon room, everyone stared at me and began sniffing emphatically. Needless to say, I was scared as hell, but I took a seat. When the service began, a man came and sat right next to me. After he sat down, I began smelling something. It was a smell I've never smelled before. The only thing I could compare it to is a reptile and vinegar. After smelling it, I became very uncomfortable. I tried to remain calm and just sat there quietly until the service was over. When the service ended, they said, "You can leave now." After that, I knew I wasn't dealing with the government anymore. I realized that whoever I was dealing with was extraterrestrial, so I became very scared. I received no further instructions from them after that, so I began applying for jobs again. Even though I had done exactly as I was told, they still followed me everywhere I went. As time went on, they started harassing me day and night. I began to hear voices more often, and I began to hallucinate things I knew weren't real. They also started playing with me sexually. Both the males and females would play out their sexual fantasies in my mind. The harassment continued for weeks and intensified as time went on. I did my absolute best to maintain my sanity and tried to avoid them. This worked for a while, but eventually I had a huge meltdown. Then they spoke aggressively. They said,
Humans are nothing more than the result of a successful genetic experiment. You are a threat to the way these people think, and you can no longer be free in society. Your life is over. You are nothing but a toy. Your purpose now is to suck.
Kyle began experiencing extreme meltdowns and mental breakdowns. He attempted multiple times and eventually checked himself in at the psych ward of a VA hospital. The medication they gave me did absolutely nothing. I just sat there surrounded by a bunch of psychotic people and became exasperated. I knew their goal was to ruin my life by making me into a crazy person. I became determined not to let that happen, and I started fighting back. After leaving the VA, everything I tried to do with my life was sabotaged. They didn't want me dead, but they also weren't going to let me live. In desperation, I went back to the altar to ask them what they wanted from me. I didn't know what else to do. Their response was, "We want you as our sex slave." Thinking they were serious, I sat there waiting for them to do something. All they did was say, "Keep coming to church." So I did. After a few more services, I found myself talking to Tim Remington face to face. He was telling me I should consider becoming a minister. We were in mid-conversation when he suddenly revealed himself to me. I have no clue how he did it. It looked as if his human face became his real face. It happened for only 1 or 2 seconds, but I was able to draw a sketch of what I saw. His eyes really stood out, so they captured my attention. They were huge and bulging. The eyelids were dark green, and the irises were yellow or brown with slit pupils. After witnessing this, nothing else happened. I continued attending the altar for a few more services, waiting for them to do something. They did nothing except for tell me to submit and surrender. I had no clue what they meant, so I left the church and never went back. After Kyle believed he had seen the true entity behind this horrific campaign of abuse, he fled. And for a little while, he almost achieved a normal life, going to school to become a pharmacist. But the psychosexual abuse returned, this time resulting in multiple public fits of rage. And finally, Kyle had had enough. On Sunday, March 6, 2016, he returned to altar, planning to execute both Tim Remington and John Padula. But after shooting Tim, he fled. Tim was rushed to the hospital. He had been shot 6 times with .45 caliber hollow point rounds. Hollow points mushroom on impact, causing maximum damage to soft tissues and typically lodge in the body, rather than going straight through, again increasing the risk of the target succumbing to their wounds. The rounds absolutely devastated Tim's body, damaging his colon, shattering his arm bones into 128 fragmented pieces, and one of the bullets left a dime-sized hole in his head. Tim spent weeks in the hospital, but eventually made a miraculous full recovery, and he would go on to become a member of the House of Representatives in Idaho, a prominent political position. Kyle Odom goes to extreme lengths in his manifesto, detailing the psychic abuse he believes he endured, but also details a full history of the Reptilians, who were originally from Mars, but came to Earth to conquer our planet when theirs became uninhabitable. According to Kyle, these reptilian interlopers couldn't physically adapt to our atmosphere, but their technology, which he claims is millions of years beyond our own, allowed them to take on a less physical existence, using, in his words, wild humans, both for sexual pleasure and to enforce their will. Of course, Kyle was almost assuredly insane, and had endured some kind of psychotic break. But is there the slightest chance that some version of Kyle's story may be true? Was there some kind of entity terrorizing him? That question led me to ask another, which left me with sort of an unsettling answer. I simply searched, how did Kyle Odom and John Padula know each other? And I found this article, quote, "Initially, church staff said Odom was not associated with their outreach programs or anyone from the church. But Padula told Creme 2 News he just realized Wednesday morning he had in fact texted and spoken on the phone with Odom before the shooting. Pastor Padula believes his contact with Odom happened by mistake. Quote, I just went through my phone and I have him saved as Kyle Wrong Number in my phone because I send out scripture every day to 300 people, said Padula. Padula said he sends out a mass text daily to encourage people with Bible verses. Somehow, Kyle Odom's number ended up on his text list. He must have got a new phone number, and it must have been one of my old friend's phone numbers that I was sending scripture to, because I send it out every day, and he started getting those text messages and was like, hey, who is this? So I called him and we started talking and building a relationship with him, and I just realized today that's who that was. Padula showed Creme 2's Lindsay Nadrich his contact list. One contact listed as Kyle, wrong number. I just read through my text messages to Kyle, and we were actually supposed to meet for coffee, and we were supposed to meet here at the church, and it never worked out to where we were able to meet. There is just something about that exchange that is deeply unsettling to me. His quotes and his excuses just ring hollow. Of course, I do not condone what Kyle did, but something just feels off about that quote, that one nagging errant thread left dangling at the end of a closed investigation. Kyle Odom's manifesto can be found on the Internet Archive, and though it is extremely disturbing, if you want to know more about this case, I suggest reading it. On February 3rd, 1982, Martin Container Company issued a repossession order for a large storage container purchased in 1980 by Malvin Weisberg. Malvin still owed 2 payments on the container, which was located behind his home in Woodland Hills, but his previous check had bounced, and he had made no effort to settle up. Workers arrived on site and began raising the container onto the truck, but the container had been loaded beyond its max weight and caused the winch to snap. A worker was ordered to climb up and open the container, and the rest is history.
So we sent the truck out to pick up the container.
I rolled out there and took the box up and started pulling it up. And it was so heavy, it just it broke the winch.
And we couldn't get it off the trailer, so we had to leave it on the trailer because it was too heavy. So I was asked by Nick to have a crew go down and unload the container at the other yard.
I got a radio call that from Ron Gillette, the foreman, and he said the men were throwing up and there was something really wrong.
One of them fell down and hit me right in front of my feet. And it was opened up, and there it was. It was a mutilated body. And the more closer I looked at it, it was a human body.
And when I came to work the following day, I saw it myself. I couldn't believe it. And just little bitty babies, just all torn to pieces. Their heads chopped off, arms, legs, it just makes you sick to see something like that. Well, really, it's just, it makes you want to cry when you see something like that.
Starting at the very front of this container, it was just wall clear to the ceiling and clear to the sides, filled with them.
I really don't want to witness it again. Not what I saw.
Well, as the supervisor for the County of Los Angeles, we found out through the media that 17,000 infants had been stored in a container. So we asked for an investigation by the district attorney and the coroner's office. We found approximately 190 were over 20 weeks of age. I think some as old as 25, 27 weeks.
After the discovery, the LA County Health Department said up to 500 fetuses were found. On February 24, 1982, the count was raised to approximately 2,000, with the majority of them being from the storage container and 200 to 300 from Weisberg's garage. The tally of fetuses was estimated at up to 17,000 in May of 1982, and was later finally set at 16,431. 193 of those fetuses were evidently over 20 weeks gestation, with the oldest being 30 weeks. According to state law at the time, all of those 193 abortions would have been illegal. State law also required all fetuses to be cremated or buried, quote, within a reasonable time. Weisberg had operated medical analytic laboratories in Santa Monica from 1976 until March of 1981, when his money troubles finally caught up to him. Medical analytic laboratories seemingly ran on government grants and payments from other medical establishments, and their service was testing fetal material and providing the data from said tests. The only acceptable form of disposal for fetal material or aborted babies from laboratories at the time was incineration. So why did Weisberg have over 16,000 dead babies in a storage container in his backyard and in his garage? Would you be surprised to learn that even after all this time, there is no answer to that question? Weisberg never faced prosecution and never had to answer for his crimes in any way, which, to be clear, in his laboratory setting, it was fully illegal not to cremate these remains. An investigation indicated that the fetuses resulted from pregnancies terminated by licensed physicians, clinics, and hospitals who contracted with medical analytic laboratories for pathology testing and disposal of the fetuses. The Los Angeles County District Attorney, John Van de Kamp, said the fetuses would be individually examined and charges would be filed against the doctors if fetuses were over the 20-week gestation limit allowed by California law at the time. Like I said before, officials found 193 fetuses that appeared to be over the 20-week limit. Van de Kamp wanted to turn the remaining fetuses over to groups who would perform memorial services for them. In May of 1982, California Attorney General George Deukmejian stated that the gestation limit of the 1967 California abortion law was considered unenforceable because of conflicts with the 23-week Roe v. Wade ruling in 1973, but fetuses could be individually examined to determine viability, which was the legal limit. In late May, Van de Kamp stated every fetus would be examined to determine if the fetus was aborted illegally. Although many of the fetuses were found to have been aborted well after the enforceable limit at the time, no charges were ever brought against anyone. President Reagan wrote a letter advocating for memorial service for these children, referring to it as a national tragedy. But the ACLU and Los Angeles Feminist Women's Health Center said this would be completely illegal, as according to them, aborted fetuses are not people and should not be treated as such, a la given funerals, and that anything other than incineration would be completely offensive.
We had a court order that would allow us to bury these infants, being a humane act. And the ACLU comes in again saying that this is just tissue. We want to incinerate them, and there's no need for a burial. Because if you had a burial, somehow that's going to create a problem. Problem for whom?
And at that time, I think everybody there realized this was wrong, that it was really wrong. Everybody standing there felt that way. Even the coroner's office, I could sense that they were treating this like they were dead people, and they are dead people. That's the way everybody treated it. Evidently, the ACLU doesn't feel that way. And then transferred it all into the original container, and as I understand, it's still up in a county yard someplace.
Is it refrigerated?
No, it's in a steel container.
And how long, do you have any idea how long it'll be there?
I don't know, but it's been 2 years now, so who knows?
This led to a 2-year-long legal battle, during which the fetuses stayed in the container in a parking lot. In August of 1985, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors ordered the fetuses to be turned over to the Guerra Gutierrez Alexander Mortuary for burial. Per the court's order, the mortuary was selected because they did not have a religious affiliation. At the time, it was noted by the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services that the fetuses had been kept in 5 pine boxes. The department assured the ACLU that there were no identifying marks on canisters containing the fetuses, and ACLU stated they would not object to a secular burial. While ACLU would not object, the Feminist Women's Health Center petitioned the Los Angeles Superior Court to block the burial, but the courts refused. The burial, or disposition, occurred on October 6, 1985, with the fetuses in 6 pine boxes, which were buried at the Oddfellows Cemetery in Boyle Heights. It was later revealed by Inspector Richard P. Cusero that medical analytical laboratories had routinely submitted questionable billings under the Medi-Cal program, using an erroneous billing code. Weisberg had been illegally submitting false reports so he could get even more grant money from the government. But the case allegedly lacked criminal prosecutive merit due to a lack of proof that the false billings were intentional. Because the laboratory was out of business and its owner had declared bankruptcy, there were no assets against which to proceed for civil recovery. No one was ever charged with any crime in connection to these 16,000 fetuses, paid any financial restitution, or spent a single day in jail.  1 In June of 2018, in the idyllic Welsh town of Ammanford, Christine Tait entered her kitchen late one night to get a cup of coffee. While she was making the coffee, she suddenly became aware of strange but distant noises. She couldn't quite place what they were at first, or even where they were coming from. She said the first sound she heard was like a strange flushing noise. So she told her husband Alan, who humored her by placing his phone on the windowsill of the bathroom, and recorded throughout the night. Although he only ever picked up the sound of some kind of machine running on the phone, they both kept hearing something. So they purchased several recording devices and placed them all over the house. On windowsills, in the kitchen, in the basement, in the front of the flat, and out the back of the flat. But none of the recording devices really picked up anything of note, except for the devices placed in the basement, which sat directly beneath the kitchen where Christine first heard the noises. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Alan dug two 1.5-meter channels into the walls and placed recording equipment inside the shafts. And what they picked up was horrifying. The Taits, convinced that people were not only living or working, but harming people in some kind of subterranean bunker or tunnels below their flat, contacted the local police and began talking to their friends and neighbors, sharing the recordings. But the police refused to investigate. As far as I can tell, there was some kind of intentional manipulation or accidental snafu with Alan's medical records. The police marked Alan's case with some kind of label, flagging him as a mentally ill person, basically ensuring that none of his claims would ever be investigated. The Tait's home was nestled in between businesses and was accessed through an alleyway in between Sophia Nails and a vacant building. And that's where the mystery deepens. The Tait's fear of somebody running an illegal operation under their home was about to start making a lot more sense. About 14 months after the Taits initially began hearing the strange noises under their flat, police arrested 21 Vietnamese gang members in a sting known as Operation Violet Panama. The criminal organization had been established using a complex system of illegal immigration using false names and aliases, and had set up several secret hidden cannabis farms and drug processing factories estimated to be worth around 25 million pounds. Two of the people arrested in Operation Violet Panama were Trang Tran and Quang Lam, the owners and proprietors of Sophia Nails, right in front of the Tait's residence. In 2020, the Taits experimented with acoustic sonar to see if they could locate the tunnels or chambers. They were apparently impressed with the results, which allegedly showed a light source coming from behind a solid subterranean wall, something that clearly shouldn't be there. Alan published a YouTube video detailing this finding, and this was apparently finally enough to get the owners of Sophia Nails interested. Someone identifying themselves as Gareth called Alan and was very interested in Alan's findings.
In 2020, we experimented with acoustic sonar to see if we could locate tunnels or chambers. The results were impressive, and we released a video on YouTube that showed a light source coming from behind a solid wall. Shortly afterwards, we had a phone call from Gareth Edwards, one of the owners of Sophia Nails. Although he'd listened to the noises, he did not seem concerned by them, but he did want to know where the light was coming from, so I told him. And shortly afterwards, Sophia Nails closed for a day and rescheduled their appointments. There was another part to Gareth's phone call that I chose not to share with anybody until now. Our suspicions were aroused simply because he showed no concern for the screaming, but wanted detailed information about the sonar results. We decided to give him the location of an entrance that we'd found, and made a video of the area. In his call, which I'll play you in a minute, he seemed to be fishing for information. Have a listen, see what you think. Gareth asked me if I actually had found an entrance to the tunnels, and if I knew where it was. Now, the next video shows the rear gardens of 22 College Street prior to Gareth's phone call.
You say maybe have you found entrances, or you've kind of worked out where they might be?
Well, I mean, you've got the hole with the light shining through, but it is accurate because that's how we found the hole.
Right. These tunnels, I mean, have they given any... where do they run? How far, and would you say, have you got any info on that?
They go from the back of the building, well, they go from the side of the building to what appears to be underneath the orbit, somewhere across the front. There appears to be two parallel ones.
When you say the tunnels, are we talking of just enough to walk upright, and we, like a square as wide as they are tall, or are they single shot, or how accurate is this the sonar thing? What are we getting on it?
Right, the sonar is accurate in as much as it will tell you depth. I know the depth of the base, but I don't know how high the tunnel is. You can see people. You can see a person anyway going through it. Yes, you can, but you can't tell whether it's a tunnel that they've crawled through or a tunnel that they're walking through.
So you say there's two, but I mean, where are they getting in? Where do you think they're getting in?
They seem to be getting in next door.
But where? As in, and then via the front door of 22? So you see they're getting into the tunnel from 22?
It's the rear garden, it's the back bit of 22.
The next video shows the rear garden of 22 College Street after Gareth's phone call. There were around 50 bags left by the side of the property after that job was completed. I'm told they contain mostly rubble. The question is, where did all that rubble come from?
Alan and Christine Tait eventually became so uncomfortable due to the screams, lack of investigation, gaslighting, and hints of some kind of larger organization being involved that they left the home. And they have not lived there for years now. And wouldn't you know it, a fire tore through Sophia Nails and the Taits' home in 2024, after which the local authorities warned any looky-loos to stay away. Can kind of guess the situation here, but who are you accused of harassing?
I don't know. I have asked. I haven't been given any information. It comes down to the photos that are on the wanted notice are exactly the same ones that were published in a smear campaign against me, trying to get people to believe that I was the paedophile Alan Herbert Delaney. But the police photos are clearer, which is quite suggestive that they were the original photos, that the smear video was taken from those photos. I mean, let's face it, anything to do with trafficking, whether it's child trafficking, people trafficking, gun trafficking, drugs trafficking, it's a massive tree. You're always going to get people that are corrupt. But in this particular case, it appears to be being covered up by the very people that should have stepped up and got stuck in and helped save those kids that we recorded.
I agree.
Well, there are many different versions of that wanted notice. One actually says I wanted in connection with a harassment offence. An earlier one says I'm wanted for malicious communications and harassment, and that the officer intends to arrest me. And this is all without ever hearing my side of the story, or even considering things like the complaints that I've made. You know, the paedophile notice, the repeated harassment, the there's a recording on my website of a woman who phoned me up that clearly threatens me. And they're all just dismissed by the police. They're just promoting one narrative. I mean, if this was a level playing field and the police were have done nothing wrong at all, why is it that their side of the story is the narrative that's pushed, and anything that I say is crushed? I mean, literally crushed. These are basic human rights. They leave my life in danger knowingly.
If you had to make a judgment, come to a conclusion about what you think was happening in Ammanford, what would it be? What do you think was happening?
Serious criminality.
Would it be accurate to describe your situation currently as on the run?
To be honest, I felt like that for about 8 years. It's like anything that I report gets no credence with the police at all. Instead of actually dealing with the points, they'll do anything but deal with the points. And even if I did have mental health issues, which is contradicted, by the way, by a letter that my doctor got, but even if I did, that still doesn't account for those voices. Nor does it account for, I wasn't the only one that recorded them. There were 9 other people that recorded them. The police have never spoken to them. Not only that, what are we saying here? That all 10 of us have got mental health issues? So, no, I don't think they're going to let this go. That's where I'm at with it. If they're not going to let it go, I can't really let it go because I'm like committed to finding out what actually called those noises. One way or the other, I mean, yes, we've given 8 years of our life to getting to the bottom of those noises, but I really do think those children just deserve justice. They really do. The world, if you like, owes them justice. The truth might be inconvenient for some people.
Of course it is.
But that doesn't mean it's not the truth. It is the truth. Those are genuine recordings recorded by me and 9 others. The police have never spoken to the 9 others. This is one of those things or matters that eventually has to come to an end one way or the other. I hope it's a satisfying outcome. From our point of view, we've done almost everything that we can. The evidence is out there. It just takes the right person, I suppose, to look at it. I mean, it comes down to, once you've heard those recordings, you can't really get those noises out of your head. You might want to, but they're still there. And you still imagine what they're actually going through. And kind of that's why I actually want to bring this to an end. I want to get either an explanation for the noises that's credible, that doesn't appear to be one apart from serious criminality. It needs sorting out. And I mean, I read quite a bit about the missing children in America, and it seems worldwide to me. It seems like somewhere along the line, something's gone wrong, and we as society, and that's all of us, need to approach this subject, find out what's actually happening, and then put a stop to it.
If you'd like to know more about the Ammanford Screams and the events that followed the initial recordings, you can visit Alan's websites, or check out his YouTube channel, which is also called True Justice Seekers, all 3 of which will be linked in the description box down below.